pain, despair, devastation, shame, helplessness, and helplessness are all invisible burdens or wounds that we all carry and feel to various degrees. Pain can make us feel alone, like we are not on us, and like we are different. And often leads to our feelings as if we have lost our internal light, and we have lost our internal light and that it has been dimmed. Pain may disproportionately impact women because women are more likely to experience pain of many things, such as misogyny, racism, other gender inequities, loss, chronic illness, incest, sexual abuse, sexual assault, or even human trafficking, and many other things. And we as women often carry, without knowledge, generations of pain from the generations of women who have become before us. Yet what we also do is we carry generations of strife and all into that too. So I once knew a little girl, and I have long studied pain because of a little girl I once knew. She experienced extraordinary pain, fear, terror, horror, and helplessness because she was sexually abused throughout her life. No one could see her fear, her devastation, the indescribable pain in her eyes, or the brokenness of her soul. Because of this little girl, I have long pondered pain and wondered if and how people who have pain endure it to overcome it, and if pain can be transmuted to something better. I was that shattered little girl. And even though the abuse no longer occurred, I was this terrified little girl screaming for help inside a woman's body for decades. I felt as if my very being, my very soul, had been destroyed by the actions of my abusers. I felt alone, consumed with despair, hopelessness, and helplessness. I experienced tornadic fear and terror daily, as well as intrusive memories that came at almost every moment and for apparent reason. And I also heaped tears of sadness almost daily, and literally and metaphorically clung to anything I could to keep myself alive. While no words can adequately describe what I endured or the enormity of my pain, I stand here today more than a survivor. I stand as an authentically empowered thriver who is doing infinitely better. Now, how did I learn to do better? How did I overcome the enormous pain that had been ignited within me at such a young age? Well, as a neuroscientist, I knew something radical that the average person may not know. I knew that pain, whether from trauma or from everyday struggles, can be transformed when the brain engages what's called neuroplasticity and it rewires itself. And if we harness that, we can be transformed. So what is neuroplasticity? Well, neuroplasticity is the amazing ability of the brain to reconnect, to rewire its own circuitry throughout an individual's life. For example, someone who was practicing the piano was a pianist. The pathways that controls finger movement and sound strengthen. However, if that person was to stop practicing the piano, those pathways would weaken. And for an individual brain who's been impacted by a stroke, neuroplasticity allows other areas of the brain to take over lost functions over time. And the same is true with trauma and healing with trauma. You see, trauma doesn't just shatter the heart, it changes the brain, shape of the brain. So what you see here is, what happens is, there are very important factions in the brain that compete to control our behavioral and our responses. And these are our thinking brain, so the brain is our prefrontal cortex. The other is our fear detection center, which is shown in red, and our threat detection system, which is shown in yellow. When these factions are in balance, we feel balanced. Our thinking brain, in green, the prefrontal cortex, controls and puts a brake on our fear and our threatening feelings, and we feel well. However, trauma hijacks our thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, and when this happens, our circuitry and our fear system and our threat system dominate. Now, our fear and our threat system control our brain when this happens, because over time, our thinking brain, our prefrontal cortex and brain becomes smaller, and it isn't able to connect as strongly to these other regions. And in our fear center, we have what's called the amygdala, which is the seat of fear. And it becomes enlarged over time. And our threat detection function exaggerates. So when this happens, we do not feel in line. We do not feel in control. And we feel like I felt, like I previously described. And why do we feel this way? It's because people or brains that have experienced trauma are not just able to re-communicate with themselves. So basically, trauma impairs the neuroplasticity mechanism in the brain, and our brain cannot rewire itself to heal. Despite this, neuroscience suggests that there are certain tactics that can be practiced that re-engage neuroplasticity and help individuals heal from trauma in other ways. So, neuroplasticity can be viewed as a ping pong ball. So, I'm up right here, I'm holding a ping pong ball. And no matter what I do, I throw it overhand, underhand, sideways. And it's always going up or to the right, over and over and over and over. This is our trauma pathway. This is the fear, the pain, the despair, the suicidal feelings, the shame that are always there. And that was me. I was stuck in this horrible plight of pain, and I did not know how to stop it. However, over time, with a metaphorical ping pong ball number 2 that happens to be blue, I started going to throw it up and to the left, metaphorically speaking. And at first, it was very small, but over time, that pathway, the ping pong ball 2 pathway strengthened, and the pathway that was formed ping pong ball 1, the trauma pathway, weakened over time, and the pathway that served me strengthened over time. That was the ping pong ball 2 pathway. So basically, how did we engage neuroplasticity? What did I do? Well, when I felt afraid, I grounded myself to the earth. And I did this by envisioning a tree, or actually becoming a tree. So I would think of a tree and how its roots are grounded and anchored firmly into the ground, and how its branches open wide to the sky with possibility, and think of how many storms trees weather. And then I actually became a tree, metaphysically speaking, and doing tree pose via yoga. And I did this every day, over and over and over, multiple times a day when I was afraid. And I envisioned my feet had roots that emanated deep into the ground, anchoring myself deep into the ground, all the way from my 6th floor apartment. And over time, this pathway helped me, doing this, created a pathway in my brain that helped me calm down. It was a ping pong ball 2 pathway that served me. I also literally and metaphorically closed the door on suicide and learned to embrace the permanence of hope. I initially did this by writing 10 items of gratitude every single day. And I did this no matter how badly I felt, No matter how suicidal I felt, no matter how I couldn't get out of bed, I did it. And for the first few years, my gratitude list consists of, I am grateful that I could breathe through this pain. However, over time, my gratitudes became more, and it promoted positive neural pathways in me, and my suicidal feelings became less. And I learned to view my life, no matter what was happening, through the lens of gratitude. I also shut the door on suicide by envisioning hope as a sunflower. So I symbolized hope because the brain actually uses symbols not only to decode memory, but to encode everyday events and emotions. So a sound can be terror. A smell can be fear. A place could be shame. And the radical thing about practicing neuroplasticity is we can change those meanings. So a place becomes strength. A smell becomes happiness. And a sound becomes freedom. And we can also insert other symbols to represent what we need to do in order to help us overcome something, and that is what I did with my representation of a sunflower as hope. So every time I felt suicidal, I thought of the sunflower and how it always pointed to the sun, and that reminded me to look for the light within, no matter how elusive it seemed to be. And over time, by practicing these things, my suicidality diminished, and I literally shut that door. I also learned how to trade shame for self-compassion, and this was difficult. So what I did is I slowly learned how I was, what I was ashamed of, and I learned to be with shame, with compassion, and treat myself as if I would treat anyone else dealing with feeling the same thing. I actually emailed myself letters of care and concern and love to remind myself that I was worthy, that I was safe, and that I was loved. And over time, as I learned to be with my shame with self-compassion, my compassion for myself and others grew, and soon I was able to realize that that which had harmed me did not define me, and I learned to be with that which was wrong, with self-compassion. And as I did that, I learned how to love not only myself, but I learned to have compassion for what happened to me in the past. Now, this doesn't just happen for me. It can happen to anybody. I have helped many people learn how to do this. In fact, I have actually conducted a small cohort study with individuals who've experienced trauma. And those who tapped into neuroplasticity did not just talk about their trauma, they rewired it. They experienced significantly less fear, shame, despair, helplessness, terror, compared to people who actually engaged in traditional therapy or something called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. You see, traditional therapy and EMDR can help a person survive. However, when we tap into the neuroplastic mechanisms of the brain, rote survival transforms into authentic power. And what that is that we are now, someone is authentically powerful, they can live. They can go from surviving to actually being their true authentic self and no longer living through the past pain that they experienced. So anyway, so tonight, what I want you to take home is that I want you to embrace the infinite light of your own being, no matter how dark you may feel inside and no matter your circumstances. And I would love to encourage everybody to practice things that engage neuroplasticity so that we can all learn that we we can all learn that no matter our story, through love and self-compassion, we are phenomenal. And thank you so much for your time.